Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here, and in this review, I just want to talk a little bit about my thoughts on how the $3,000 Meze Empyrean II, which I have right here, stacks up against the almighty HIFIMAN Susvara, which to me is a gold standard for headphones. The Susvara, of course, is $6,000, and I have it right here. And in order for me to talk about this, I just want to break this down in terms of build quality, aesthetics, and comfort. As the first section, in which I'll do a shootout for these two headphones. Secondly, I'll talk about tonality, by which I refer to the frequency response in relation to no target graph, just in terms of my personal preferences of these two headphones. And finally, technical performance, by which I refer to things like resolution, things like sound stage, things like imaging, the impact or dynamics, and of course, speed of transients. And lastly, timbre. Okay, so to jump right in, guys, the Susvara, of course, is the king of headphones. That's what I generally believe. So that's sort of a giveaway of where this review is headed. It is in many ways the best headphone on the planet, but there are significant ways in which the Meze Empyrean II does give the reigning champion of headphones a run for its money and then some. For instance, if you look at the build quality and sheer aesthetics and the looks, this I honestly feel is a better looking headphone, and I think very few people will disagree with me. So the Susvara is a pretty nifty looking headphone. Like, it does have these very interesting shaped ovoid cups. It's a very open sounding headphone, and it's a very open headphone as is pretty evident from the grills and how much of the drivers you can see. But beyond that, I mean, it's an interesting sort of a suspension, double suspension strap system, well, single suspension strap, of course, but double headband system. But the outer headband does feel and look a bit ever so slightly cheap, I would rather say. This, on the other hand, it's just very premium looking. It's extremely premium looking all the way through, whether you talk about the strap, or whether you talk about the pads, or whether you talk about how this moves like all the way 360 degrees, whether you talk about this sort of this rod on which this headband system slides in or out, no pun intended, of course, and just the sheer beauty of the artwork here on the outer cups. So in terms of aesthetics and build quality, not quality per se, but even quality, the premiumness, of course, the Meze Empyrean wins easily. Comfort-wise, I want to say it's pretty close, because I'll show you what the Empyrean sort of feels like. So looks-wise, I do want to mention that some people, when they first get into the hobby, they think that this is a very ridiculous look, and they're not wrong. It can look ridiculous to the untrained person. I mean, the first time my wife saw me wearing this, she was like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" But I mean, you get used to, all kinds of shapes and sizes of headphones. And so, yeah, this could be a con. This does look funny, I just want to say. Whereas Susvara does look far more normal. And I would even say that this sort of a dual headband system that the HIFIMAN guys have pioneered is a pretty iconic look. And this is what the Susvara looks like, which I think is pretty standard. And it looks better. It looks a lot less clumsy. And these ovoid cups are extremely roomy. Now, to sort of think about which one is more comfortable, which one I can have on my head for longer, somehow Susvara doesn't feel as heavy. There's a way in which this strap, it has great distribution of weight, right? And this strap doesn't really bother me, although I don't have hair. It might bother you even less, because it feels very light and comfy, and it's very roomy. And I want to say the comfort might just go with two Susvaras, because although this is extremely comfortable, and a lot of people will say that the Meze Empyrean 1 or 2 is the most comfortable headphone that they've ever worn. I mean, see, it's a different kind of comfort. I mean, the way the pads cushion around your ears, I feel like it's a little more plush. It's a little more comfortable. There's slightly more clamp, which is not a bad thing, because it fits more securely and more snugly. And I feel the weight just a bit more. I'm not talking about absolute weight, but I'm talking about the weight that you feel. So it's almost a tie, but I would still give it, the Susvara, a slight win in terms of comfort. Now, in terms of sheer build quality, Susvara and the Empyrean are both extremely well built. Of course, this has more premium materials. This does not. You even have the faux wood that some people complain. But honestly speaking, in terms of pure quality of build, they're both very good. Susvara hasn't failed on people. HIFIMAN's entry-level headphones have in the past, note I say in the past, failed a few times on people, on users. This, of course, doesn't have that sort of an issue. It never has had that sort of an issue. It's an extraordinary headphone, and everything Meze builds is extraordinary. Even the entry-level Meze headphones never had an issue falling apart, or something not working, or driver failure. Not in any way that stands out to me. So in terms of aesthetics, build quality, and comfort and ergonomics, I would probably give the win to the Meze Empyrean IIs. Now to talk about tonality, the Susvara is just extraordinarily well tuned, and it's sort of like the magnum opus of Dr. Fanbian. It's just beautifully tuned. It's somewhat close to Harman, but better because it definitely has a smoother transition and more energy, honestly, in the treble regions, whether you're talking about lower or mid or upper treble. So it just has a beautiful treble, and the way the mid-range glides into the treble is the stuff of legends, honestly. It also doesn't have the super duper bass shell that Harman tune IMs do. It's a flat bass response, very typical of planars, and especially the HIFIMAN planars. Very well extended, and it's just stunning. It's just stunning to hear. The tuning is just extraordinary, and I would say the tuning of the Susvara is slightly better. The Empyrean II does have a more audacious tuning in many ways, and a more interesting and colored take on how a headphone should be tuned. So it takes what was great about the Meze Empyrean I, which was its superb, impactful bass, great spacious soundstage, and very rich vocals. And then it adds a little more forwardness in vocals, because a lot of people complained that the vocals sounded a bit muddy and unclear in the previous iteration in the Empyrean I. And then it does retain the air frequency element, which I liked in Empyrean I, which some people did not. They thought it was too bright in the upper treble. This reins that in a bit, but still retains it enough so that it sounds spacious. So this is extremely well tuned. I would give a slight edge to the Susvaras in terms of tuning, but this is not a slacker in any sense. Now, technical performance-wise, guys, things get more interesting because technical performance is somewhat subjective. Now, resolution-wise, of course, the Meze Empyrean does not beat the Susvara. The Meze Empyrean is great and resolving, but this is the resolution king. Like only a couple of headphones, or maybe three, can I think outclass this. The Stax X9000, which is not the perfect headphone because the Stax also has issues with its bass. The Abyss AB12665 DC, which has massive issues with its mid-range. The RAL SR1B, and the new Imanis, of course. So it is not the resolution king in the absolute sense of the word, but in this sort of realm of $6,000, it's up there, right? It's up there with the Abyss and with the Stax. And I don't think the Meze Empyrean beats the Susvara for resolution by any means. I think the Susvara beats the Empyrean. But when you talk about other things like impact and slam, I think this is the king between these two, at least. So this slams hard. This has great dynamics. Like the sort of transition between the quieter and louder parts of the passages is handled like a champion on these Renaro drivers. The Empyrean does slam like a truck. It's a wonderful headphone if you like bass slam. Susvara leaves people wanting just a little bit in terms of bass slam. You can amp it with the right amp and you get more slam, so that's all there. But in its stock form, I think this wins for dynamics. Soundstage is interesting because Susvara does beat the Empyrean for soundstage depth. It's extremely deep, and when sounds are meant to come at you or come to you from a distance, that happens. That is recreated perfectly on the Susvara. Whereas this is interesting because I get taller images with Empyrean, which does aid to a very lifelike sort of imaging. Very tall and very spacious and grandiose images on the Empyrean too. Width-wise, I think they're pretty similar. Susvara can be a bit quirky in its width because sometimes things sound very up and close and straight into your ears, and like you get a sense of sounds coming from the drivers often. Whereas with this, it's slightly wider most of the time. So the soundstage width issue here is a bit more interesting and difficult to call. Overall, for soundstage, I would think they're fairly equally placed. Timbrally, I think they're equally placed. I think this does bass timbre better. This has a very realistic bass timbre, so kick drums, bass guitar sound more lifelike on this. Mid-range is a toss-up. If you like your mid-range to be very airy, this is a better sounding mid-range. If you like your mid-range to be richer and warmer, this is by far better. And finally, on treble timbre, I think this beats the Empyrean. So timbre is, again, I think a tie. So I covered a soundstage where it's a tie, timbre where it's a tie, dynamics where this wins, and resolution where this wins. Then lastly, imaging. Image precision is something Susvara is known for, and I think the image precision here is fantastic. But the Susvara imaging is a bit interesting because it is very amp and DAC dependent. On certain DACs and amps, I feel like the images are very close to my ear, especially when it comes to lateral imaging, where this has decent imaging. I wouldn't say this has mind-blowing imaging, but this is a very good imaging for the price. So imaging-wise, it's a toss-up, honestly. I would probably give it to the Susvara. But that just goes to show that other than resolution, which Susvara dominates, and overall, the Susvara is a more technical headphone. Although this is a $3,000 headphone and this is a $6,000 headphone, I mean, I wouldn't say this is a different league in a certain sense. And I understand why guys own both. And I like people who actually dabble across different price points because price often doesn't mean a lot, right? You can like a headphone, that's half the price of your favorite headphone. So if you had a Susvara and this was your favorite headphone, I would understand if it is, because it is my favorite headphone, and you had a Meze Empyrean as well, I would understand it, because I do think it's a wonderful complement to the Susvara. So that would be my summary of the review, guys. The Empyrean 2 is a fantastic complement to the Susvara. That being said, I understand why people keep buying headphones of the same caliber price-wise, so a RAL or an Abyss or a Susvara and a Stax X9K. Once they move up from a $3,000 price point to a $6,000 price point, there's no going back for them. I personally tend to gravitate towards conversations with people who have a bevy and a wide variety of headphones across price points, because I think that makes life more interesting, because there are certain things these guys do the Susvaras can, and vice versa. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.